Right now, you're probably watching this during a break. Maybe between meetings, maybe on your commute. Maybe you've got 5 minutes before the next thing on your list demands your attention. And that's exactly what makes this so strange. Because the humans who came before you, the ones with the same brain, the same emotions, the same need for meaning, they didn't have a next thing. They didn't have a list. They didn't have a commute. They woke up when their body was ready. They ate when they were hungry. They rested when they were tired. And nobody called it laziness. Because for 300,000 years, that was just called being human. So here's the question that nobody actually stops to ask. Before jobs existed, before bosses, before schedules, before the alarm clock, what did people actually do all day? Because if life back then was nothing but brutal survival, constant danger, and desperate scrambling for food, then where did the time go? The answer is one of the most surprising things science has ever uncovered about our species. And once you hear it, you're going to look at your calendar very differently. Let's start with the fact that is going to make you genuinely angry. Ancient humans worked about 3 to 5 hours a day. That's it. Not 8, not 10, not the 11 and a half hours the average person now spends working, commuting, and answering emails after dinner. 3 to 5 hours. Then they stopped. How do we know this? Because some of those people are still here. The Kungsan of the Kalahari Desert in Botswana, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Aceh of Paraguay, the Martu of Australia. These are communities still living close to the pattern our ancestors maintained for almost all of human history. And researchers didn't just observe them, they measured them, followed them, timed them. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living with the Kungsan in the late 1960s. His finding rewrote the textbooks. Adults worked roughly 2.5 days per week to feed the entire group. That's about 17 hours. The rest of the time was theirs. The Hadza showed the same thing. Men foraged around 4 hours a day, women around 3.5. After that, the day belonged to them. In 1966, anthropologist Marshall Solins looked at all of this evidence and wrote something that shocked the academic world. He called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society, not because they had a lot, but because they needed very little and got it fast. Think about what that means. The human species spent 95% of its existence working fewer hours per day than the average modern barista, and nobody complained. Nobody called it inefficient. Nobody told them they needed to hustle harder, because there was nothing to hustle for. You couldn't store food indefinitely. You couldn't accumulate more than you could carry. Working extra hours produced exactly nothing you could use. So they stopped when the work was done. They didn't have weekends because they didn't need them. Every day already contained one, so they had 6 to 8 hours free every single day. What did they do with it? Mostly this. They talked. Before you think that sounds boring, understand something. In a world with no police, no courts, no written contracts, and no banks, the only security you had was the depth of your relationships. If people didn't like you, they didn't share food when you were hungry. If the group turned against you, you were finished. Your social bonds weren't a luxury. They were your survival system. And you maintained them the same way you maintain any system. You invested time in it, every single day. Oxford anthropologist Robin Dunbar studied this for decades. His conclusion was that the human brain, that enormous, expensive, calorie-consuming organ, didn't evolve primarily to make tools or plan hunts. It evolved to manage social complexity, to track relationships, to remember who helped you, who betrayed you, who you could trust, and who you couldn't. Social intelligence wasn't a soft skill. It was the original intelligence. And here's the fascinating part. Other primates maintain social bonds through physical grooming, sitting together, picking through fur, reinforcing connection through touch. It works, but you can only groom one animal at a time. Humans replaced grooming with language. Sitting around a fire, you can maintain bonds with 10 people simultaneously. You can groom an entire group with words. Dunbar calculated that pre-agricultural humans devoted around 40% of their waking hours to this kind of social connection. But what were they actually saying? Anthropologist Polly Weissner of the University of Utah spent decades recording and analyzing conversations among the Kungsan. What she found was striking. During the day, Conversations were almost entirely practical. Who spotted animal tracks? Which plants were ready? Whether someone wasn't pulling their weight. But at night, around the fire, 81% of conversations shifted completely. They became stories, myths about how the world began, tales of ancestors who did impossible things, jokes, adventures from distant places, moral lessons wrapped in narrative so they'd stick. This wasn't entertainment. This was the transmission system for everything the group knew. Every piece of ecological knowledge, every social rule, every hard lesson from the past encoded in story and carried forward, generation after generation, without a single written word. In a world with no books, no schools, no libraries, the campfire was all three. The campfire wasn't where they rested from the work. The campfire was the most important work of all. Here's something that will either comfort you or genuinely disturb you. Ancient humans were better sleepers than you are, not because life was easier, because their sleep was structured differently in a way that actually matched how the human brain is built. In 2015, UCLA neuroscientist Jerome Siegel did something that had never been done before. He gave activity tracking devices to members of 3 hunter-gatherer societies, the Hadza in Tanzania, the San in Namibia, and the Tsimane in Bolivia, and measured their actual sleep for weeks. They slept an average of 6 to 6.5 hours per night, less than modern recommendations. But their sleep efficiency was over 96%. That means when they were asleep, they were actually asleep. No lying awake at 3 in the morning, no anxiety spiral, no staring at the ceiling replaying a conversation from 2 weeks ago. They fell asleep when the temperature dropped. They woke when it rose. Their entire biology was synchronized with the environment it evolved inside. And then there's something even stranger. Medieval historian Roger Eckerk of Virginia Tech spent years reading pre-industrial European texts, diaries, medical records, court documents, literature going back to the 9th century. He found hundreds of references to something called first sleep and second sleep. People went to sleep when it got dark, woke naturally around midnight, stayed awake for an hour or two talking, praying, being still, thinking, then slept again until dawn. This two-phase pattern appears across cultures and centuries. It wasn't insomnia. It was the default. It only disappeared when artificial lighting pushed bedtimes later and the Industrial Revolution demanded workers arrive at a fixed hour regardless of what their body was doing. Sleep researchers now think this biphasic pattern may match the brain's natural rhythm far better than the compressed 8-hour block we try to force ourselves into. Ancient humans didn't sleep better because life was easier. They slept better because the night hadn't been canceled yet. Stop here for a second. Ancient humans had more free time than you do. They slept better than you do. They had more genuine social connection every single day than most people manage in a week. And somehow, in those unhurried hours, they built the cognitive foundation that every civilization that came after them was built on. Which means the question has changed. It's not what did they do all day. It's what exactly did we lose when we decided to fill all that time up. Because what they did in their free hours wasn't random. Scientists now believe it was the most sophisticated long-term project in the history of biology. The project was this: building a mind capable of imagining a future that didn't exist yet. When a Kungsan child picks up a stick and pretends to hunt with it, is that play or is that practice? According to Dr. Peter Gray of Boston College, that's the wrong question. Because in every hunter-gatherer society he studied, play, and practice weren't two different things. They were the same thing. Gray analyzed child development across 10 documented hunter-gatherer societies. In every single one, children spent most of their waking hours in what looked like free play, running, chasing, making things, imitating adults, trying and failing and trying again. And in every single one, that play was a direct rehearsal of exactly the skills they'd need to survive as adults. Tracking animals, reading plants, making fire, navigating conflict, caring for children. Here's the number that changes how you think about education. In all 10 societies, formal instruction, an adult deliberately sitting down to teach a child a specific skill, accounted for less than 5% of learning. Over 95% of everything they knew, they learned through play. No curriculum, no grades, no standardized tests, no homework. Just Children watching, imitating, experimenting, getting it wrong, trying again in mixed age groups that functioned as self-organizing learning machines. And the adults played too. The Piraha of the Amazon spent afternoons in games that mapped almost exactly onto their real survival needs: throwing accuracy, reading water, night navigation. The line between recreation and preparation was invisible, because evolution doesn't separate fun from function. It makes function feel like fun. That dopamine reward you feel when you're deeply engaged in something that's ancient, that's your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Every game ancient children played was preparation for the life ahead. They just never noticed they were training. 45,000 years ago, on the island of Sulawesi in Indonesia, someone crawled into a dark cave and painted a pig on the wall. It is the oldest known figurative painting on Earth. For a long time, we assumed it was religious ritual, or boredom, or some early humans' version of doodling. We were wrong. Dr. Genevieve von Petzinger of the University of Victoria spent years cataloging the geometric symbols found inside ancient caves across Europe: spirals, crosshatch patterns, dots, open angles, lines. She identified 32 distinct symbols repeating across 52 cave sites separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The same 32 symbols, everywhere, with no contact between the people making them. This is not decoration. This is a standardized communication system predating Sumerian writing by more than 25,000 years. And in Australia, the Aboriginal songlines go even further. These are networks of songs that encode, in melody and lyric, the precise geographic location of waterholes, dangerous terrain, seasonal food sources, and sacred sites across an entire continent. The song is the map. The singing is navigation. The knowledge inside them is thousands of years old, carried forward through memory and ceremony. Why art? Why music? Why story? Because the human brain doesn't store information like a hard drive. It stores information like art does, through emotion, image, rhythm, and meaning. Paper hadn't been invented. Clay tablets hadn't been invented. Writing hadn't been invented. What had been invented was the human memory, the one storage system that never floods, never burns, never corrupts, optimized over millions of years to hold exactly the format they were encoding into it. The oldest paintings in the world weren't a hobby. They were a library, built on the walls of caves, because those were the only walls they had. Now, the part we have to be honest about. This picture, the easy afternoons, the storytelling fires, the unhurried days, was not guaranteed. It was not universal. And when the conditions that made it possible broke down, everything broke down with it. When Norse settlers arrived in Greenland around 985 AD, they thrived. They made art. They played games. They built communities with enough surplus time to invest in beauty. Then the Little Ice Age deepened. Archaeologists Thomas McGovern and Jared Diamond studied what happened next in the waste layers of those settlements. As the temperatures dropped and survival became harder, something disappeared from the record. Decorative objects gone, games gone, art gone. The people were working every available hour just to stay alive. They were extinct by around 1408. 300 miles away, the Inuit, with better adapted tools and generations of cold climate knowledge, maintained their traditional pattern through the exact same climate event, and survived. The difference wasn't strength. It wasn't intelligence. It was knowledge fit for the environment they were actually in. The point is not that ancient life was paradise. The point is that the low work, deeply social, creative, well-rested pattern was the equilibrium, the place human life naturally returned to whenever the conditions allowed it. The ancient human working desperately from sunrise to sunset was the exception. The ancient human with a free afternoon was the rule. And that changes everything about how we understand where we came from. Here's the part that should keep you awake. We built a civilization that solved survival, the actual problem, the one that took ancient humans 3 to 5 hours a day. We automated it. We built machines for the farming, the manufacturing, the labor, and then, instead of taking the time back, we invented new work to fill it. The agricultural revolution promised easier lives. It delivered longer working hours and worse nutrition. The skeletal evidence is not subtle. Early farmers were shorter, sicker, and died younger than the hunter-gatherers they replaced. The Industrial Revolution promised prosperity. It delivered 14-hour factory shifts and children in coal mines. The Digital Revolution promised freedom. It delivered email at midnight and the feeling that you're always slightly behind. And the science keeps arriving at the same quiet conclusion. The schedule that ancient humans kept a few hours of purposeful work, long hours of social connection, time for creation and play, and deep, efficient sleep synchronized with the natural world is the schedule that sleep researchers, neuroscientists, and evolutionary psychologists independently identify as optimal for human health, cognitive performance, and emotional well-being. We lived that way for 300,000 years. We knew it worked. And then we built a world that made it impossible. The anxiety epidemic, the loneliness epidemic, the burnout epidemic, the sleep disorder epidemic. These aren't personal failures. They aren't character flaws. They aren't problems you can fix by waking up earlier or optimizing harder. They are what happens when you run a 300,000-year-old nervous system on a schedule it was never built to handle. You're watching this in a gap, a break, a commute, 5 minutes you carved out of a day that already had too much in it. And somewhere right now, a Hadza man in Tanzania is sitting under a tree in the early afternoon. His work is done. He has nowhere to be. He is not productive. He is not achieving. He is not optimizing anything. He's doing exactly what 300,000 years of human evolution shaped him to do. And every part of him, his brain, his body, his nervous system, is in complete agreement about it. We didn't lose something minor when we built the modern world. We lost the default setting. We traded it for food security and population growth and technological power. And maybe that trade was worth it. Maybe it was inevitable. But we should at least know what we gave up. Ancient humans didn't have jobs. They had something much harder to find. They had time. And for 300,000 years, they knew exactly what to do with it. We've been working ever since, trying to get it back.